Hi guys, welcome to another BigLipz podcast. As always, I am Kath Maurice, joined by Sam Macaulay Blair.
Hello.
So as always, we've got this is podcast number 12. We've got a new topic, and basically just a quick recap. We every couple of weeks we get together, we talk about films, and then we just post it. That's pretty much it. It's the most succinct way I can put it. So this week we are going to be talking about opening sequences and scenes in movies, which it's funny because our first podcast was endings, so now we're doing openings. So yeah, I think we should just fire right in. Our first topic is the obvious choice. What is your favourite opening sequence or scene? So Sam, do you want to fire away?
Absolutely. Yeah. Again, I always feel like these things are like you always have like a million answers ready to go, and then it comes to sitting down to actually like picking one, and they all just disappear from your head. So this was like surprisingly tough. I kind of like came up with this one by accident, because there was a category that you were going to talk about, which you ended up scrapping, which was the best, our favorite like action movie opening. And that one, like when I was thinking over that one, I thought of the J.J. Abrams Star Trek movie from like 2009.
Okay.
And the more once that was in my head, the more I was like, actually, that is a fantastic opening to a film. So I like when I went to see that for the first time, I think I was like 14 years old, but I'd never really seen any Star Trek. I never really had any interest in Star Trek. I think I just went to see it with like a parent, and yeah, I don't think I had like huge expectations going in. I had no like attachment for like the series or like the lore or anything like that. But the movie I think does a really good job of sort of like getting you on board with everything, like the universe, the sort of characters really quickly. I don't know if have you seen the 2009 Star Trek?
I think I've seen it once, but that was a while ago. My mum's a big fan of it. She liked the original ones as well, so I've seen one of the original
Okay,
ones.
cool.
Um,
More than
but
I
I
have
do
then.
I do remember it being I do remember it being like I remember being surprised that I was enjoying it as much as I was.
Yeah. So for anyone that hasn't seen it, the opening it basically starts. I mean, the 2009 Star Trek movie like sort of focuses on like the original Star Trek characters like Kirk and Spock, etc. And the movie opens with the birth of Kirk, and his sort of dad's heroic sacrifice. And again, like I just think it does a really good job of. It opens with an action sequence, but there is like a strong emotional payoff in the first like 10 minutes of the movie, which is really sort of hard to do, to make you sort of care about these characters
Yeah.
and effectively kill one of them off. And at the same time, you're setting up like one of like the most iconic characters ever created, really. And obviously, like giving people like me like a sort of fresh introduction to the character. You're also telling like fans, because obviously the sort of point of the Abrams Star Trek movies is that they are following like a divergent timeline, and that is also established like right from the get go, which I knew nothing about that. Like I thought it was literally just like a clean prequel.
Right.
So
I
that
didn't know
was
that either.
so I was pretty surprised by like the fact that the movie just immediately kind of like trashes the previous continuity. Again, not that I was familiar with it, but again it's a pretty ballsy move for like a movie's opening.
Yeah.
So I think yeah, like all in, I think like I really rate the first Star Trek movie. But I think like yeah, I think as far as movie openings go, I think it does a lot to kind of get people on its side very quickly. I think you can tell straight off as well. If you like the first 10 minutes, you're gonna love the rest of the movie. If you don't, then you're not. But yeah, I think it all in all, it's a masterclass in a movie opening.
Good choice. I do remember it's Chris Hemsworth in it. Is he Kirk's dad?
He is, yes.
Yeah.
So apparently casting for that one, I don't even think he was the first choice. I'm sure I remember reading an interview where Mark Wahlberg had said that he was actually like either in the running for it, or he was offered. It was offered to him, or at least like his agent approached him. And he said he couldn't understand any of the dialogue,
Oh no.
which is also kind of weird because like I mean, well, Mark Wahlberg's in some pretty terrible films,
Yeah.
but also I don't think like from what I remember about it, I don't think there's really that much in the way of like technical like sci-fi jargon. Like I don't think it's really that like sort of geeky or nerdy. I think it's like again like I think you could follow it pretty like simply.
Yeah. Oh, no,
But
that's
yeah,
a shame.
obviously just had no idea what the movie was at all, and passed on it. Which, you know, to be fair, like I'm very glad that they had Chris Hemsworth instead, because I think he does a fantastic job.
Yeah. Mark Wahlberg's a weird one because he's someone that you can't really take very seriously.
No,
Yeah.
no, you can't.
Poor guy. But no, that was an interesting choice. I think it's funny as well because I do remember that's like one of the only bits that I remember is this kind of shot of like Chris Hemsworth. So that's funny.
Like, leaves an impression.
Yeah. So I've gone for the very obvious choice for mine, and it was one that immediately sprung to mind, and I couldn't get it out of my head, like your one, like you were saying, and that is, of course, the opening to Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom.
Oh, fantastic!
Not the Temple of Doom, the Raiders of the Lost Ark. Sorry.
Raiders of the Lost Ark. Yep.
Yep.
Fair.
I think it's a bit of a cliched, obvious choice, but I think it's very much warranted because it's like iconic as well. You've got this whole kind of like Spielberg builds this whole kind of like mystery, because you only see like the back of Indiana Jones' head, and he's just kind of shrouded in like shadows and mystery, and then the point where you do see him, he's like thwarting this bad guy, and he kind of steps out from the shadows and you see his face, and he just looks so cool. I think the whole sequence as well, like you were talking about, it's very actiony as well, which kind of sets you up for the whole movie, which is nice. And obviously, like there's the whole iconic bit when he's like going through all the traps and stuff, and it obviously it very quickly shows like Indiana as a character and how he knows his stuff basically, because he's like working his way through all these traps. He's like guiding the kind of problematic stereotype of like the stupid kind of foreigner who's like tagging along. He's like guiding him along and stuff. And I think it was funny, the more I was thinking about it, the more the first kind of 10 minutes of the movie is like its own kind of like mini movie, where there's the whole, you get introduced to the character, he goes on a quest, there's like antagonists, there's issues arise, and then he kind of gets around them. So I thought that was funny as well, because it was kind of like, it reminded me like if you were going to make the Indiana Jones movie, I would have made that first 10 minutes and been like, here's my pitch. And I feel like you would immediately have been bought.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a very good point actually. Yeah.
But no, I think as well, I remember watching it when I was young as well, and it's obviously they're so full of action, and then there's like suspense and tension when he's running away for that big ball. Is he going to get out in time? And then I remember the really scary bit when the guy that he's with kind of like double crosses him and takes the idol, and he doesn't throw the whip back kind of thing. So Indy's kind of stuck. Yeah. And then when he comes across him again, he like gets his comeuppance in like a proper like Hollywood way, where he's like just horribly impaled through his whole body and dead. Yeah. So that was like a nice little like, oh, go you. It kind of perfectly kind of sets up the movie. It's a bit camp, it's a bit like fun kind of thing. Like you don't. Yeah. It's like you're not like celebrating that guy's dead, but you're like, oh, that's what he deserved.
Thank you, karma.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that was my choice for that. And then a little second one, which is kind of cheating because it's not really the opening scene, it's the opening credits. But my choice for this one was Grease, because they have this really cool, like it's a whole like cartoon section of them introducing all the characters. Yeah. And I also thought that was really funny because I chose Grease as my choice for the worst ending, but I've also chosen it for the best opening.
It all goes downhill from there.
Yeah, exactly. Just watch that first 2 minutes and then turn it off, because it doesn't get any better than that.
Yeah, fair. Oh dear. No, very good picks actually, and I like the fact that you went in very different directions with both of them. I think Raiders of the Lost Ark is a pretty difficult one to top as far as movie openings go, because as you say, it does just like perfectly sort of surmise I guess what would become the Indiana Jones franchise. You do get like a mini sort of taster of like everything to come, and it is like extremely iconic. I think the Indiana Jones movies are a weird one, where like I think I saw bits of them on TV when I was younger, and then I didn't actually watch them properly, I think, until either just before or just after the fourth one came out. So I was like 13 or something when I'd seen them.
Yeah, we don't
which
talk
which
about the fourth one.
I know exactly. But I think like I do like that is unfortunate because like my experience of the first time watching Raiders, it was more a case of like, it was less a case of me being like wowed by it and more a case of me being like, oh, okay, so this is like what all these other things were parodying all these times.
Of course, yeah.
But it was like I had basically seen like all the sort of beats, and it still does a good. There still were like some nice surprises in there, which to the movie's credit is like, you know, it's impressive that it can surprise you after you effectively know like all the sort of main outlines of what's going to happen. Again, like the bit you mentioned where the guy chooses not to throw the whip. That was that bit sort of got me. I do remember having like a strong reaction to that. But yeah, like the sort of boulder unfortunately was something that I'd seen in like a million things. I think starting with maybe Crash Bandicoot.
Of course, yeah.
So it was kind of weird seeing like the payoff to that being like, okay, so this is where it sort of all originates from. But yeah, at the same time, like I absolutely cannot fault the movie for any of that. I mean, there's a reason it's like it's been parodied and like paid homage to and stuff all these times because it obviously has left like such an impression on people's minds. You know, it has like had such an impact on like filmmakers. And yeah, it is just like pretty damn iconic as far as like movie openings go, and it's just a lot of fun as well.
It is. I think I've always said like Steven Spielberg does like amazing like movies. Like his movies are so, they're just made for the screen and they're fun, but you still get all these different types of emotions, and that like perfectly kind of encapsulates that as well.
I agree. I absolutely agree. Yeah, he is very good at sort of delivering. And there's sort of like, I guess like when he's at his best, there's sort of like almost like a safety I feel like with his movies, like a sort of comfort that you just like slip into when you're watching them. It just sort of feels like, I guess, like being a kid again and watching them. There is like a sort of magic to them. And yeah, again, Indiana Jones is very much like a sort of peak of that. And I think it's also quite George Lucas, I think. In that it's not doing anything like crazy ambitious, really. It's not doing anything like mental or super complex. It's quite straightforward. It is just like a sort of action serial, but it is delivered in like the most satisfying way it really could be. And you know, it is. We know obviously how iconic Indiana Jones is, and I love the fact that it does feel like the movie knows how iconic Indiana Jones is going to become. Like as you say, like they do make a point of giving him like a big reveal, which is then sort of like even like the sequels sort of like pay homage or pay respects to that, like by like having like further reveals of the character again. The everyone's favorite Kingdom of the Crystal Skull obviously has like the reveal in that of the character again when he's obviously a little bit older. But yeah, it's obvious that they're very aware that like they completely like caught lightning in a bottle with Indiana Jones, and they are very much like, okay, well the first movie has like such a cool opening, we do need to make an effort with like the openings of the others.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's funny as well because I never really enjoyed, like I always enjoyed the first kind of 10 minutes when he's in the kind of cave bit. And then there was the whole bit in the bar with, what's her name, Marion, I think?
Yeah.
And I always thought that was low-key boring, like, I don't know whether I'm just like, I don't know whether I just don't like her as a character, so I was like, oh, this is really boring. But I think it's funny that it would peak and then go down and then peak again. Like weird.
Yeah, I completely get what you mean, to be fair. Like the movie, it does feel like the movie dips a little bit after the opening. And I guess that is like, you have so much fun with Indy that I guess like, when you then cut to a different character. And you know, Marion's a fine character, but she's not Indiana Jones.
Yeah, exactly.
Because like, I mean, I think Indiana Jones was literally voted like the greatest movie character of all time. So you are going to struggle literally like cutting to any character.
That's true. Yeah, that was just like the draw.
Yeah, exactly.
Poor women.
Exactly.
But she made her comeback in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. So what more could you want?
Exactly. She totally saved that movie, didn't she? Came really close to disaster, and then she steps in and
thank God for her.
Won her. Yeah.
Moving it swiftly on from discussing that movie.
Fair.
So our next one we're going to talk about was our least favourite opening. So I thought this one was quite difficult actually, because I thought that when you had, by and large, when you had a bad beginning, it tended to lead to a bad movie. So it was hard for me anyway to think of a movie, like a good movie that had a kind of bad or terrible or whatever opening. So I'm interested to hear what you came up with.
I completely agree with what you're saying. Yeah, like I had that exact same struggle of like you just think when you think of like poor openings, usually it's the movie itself is also quite poor, and that kind of feels like a cheat because it's not really that interesting to go down that avenue. It's much more interesting, like you say, to think of like something that either like could have been better if like had a stronger opening, something that is good and has maybe a poor opening, or something where the opening kind of maybe damages the quality of the rest of the film. So that was kind of the angle I went for. And again, like I spent like a good while, probably more than any other, thinking over this category, and I landed on a film that I watched quite recently actually for the first time properly. I think I watched it this year, but I'd seen like the opening of it when I was younger. So I picked Moulin Rouge.
Okay.
A sort of Baz Luhrmann film. I know. And I think like I really think the movie obviously takes a bit of a risk in telling you that obviously I'm assuming you've seen Moulin Rouge.
Yes.
Yeah. The movie obviously like, takes a bit of a gamble in telling you that Satine is, she by the movie's end she's going to be dead. Like it spells her fate quite clearly. And I really felt that was like damaging to the film. Especially because like I got that information like 10 years basically before I watched the rest of the film. Maybe more than that actually. Maybe like 11, 12 years or something before actually watching the whole film. So it's like maybe I am being a bit harsh on the movie because like that's a lot of build up.
Yeah,
the movie has to kind of like pay off just inadvertently.
I can imagine you like subconsciously for like 10 years being like, oh, maybe this is how she died and maybe this is what...
I think ultimately it's like usually if like a movie tells you something like that, you expect them to kind of you expect them to go in a sort of unexpected direction with it, or like have like there to be like some sort of like payoff to it. But I felt like in the context of the film, it is just the case that she dies, and it's not that like it's not really that surprising. It's not really that like, and it almost like it's that tragic aspect of it works, but I think it would have been a lot stronger if you didn't know it was coming. Obviously they do have like a slight fake out where it seems like she's gonna get shot, but then no, she just dies of like the disease that they sort of tell you she's like had, and again like it just. Yeah, I just felt like the movie didn't need to telegraph that, and then it kind of like I feel like it really robs a lot of like the emotion of that because it's coming, you have like foreknowledge that the characters really don't, and the sort of payoff to Ewan McGregor's character is again like exactly what you see at the start, which is just like him sitting down and writing it. Like that's literally all there is to it. It's just like exactly what the movie shows you at the beginning. There's no like sort of neat surprise or like twist on that. I think for me like the opening of Moulin Rouge. I also think like even like beyond that, and I mean the movie is very sort of stylistic, like really sort of in your face with like its visuals, and I think parts of that work really well, but I do think it goes a bit over the top, and I think in the opening in particular as well, like stylistically, I think when the movie is even actually like kind of getting into like the sort of flashback and like setting itself up, it goes a bit too far, because I do remember sitting down and watching it and just being like, I don't really enjoy this, like this is just a bit too much. And it wasn't until like the movie was like further in that I was like, okay, now it feels like it's calmed down a little bit. I feel like the movie's like a lot more enjoyable. It needed a bit of like balance, but it was just a bit too like in your face at first. So like for those sort of two distinct reasons, I think my pick for least favourite opening is got to be Moulin Rouge.
No, that's really interesting. I think you've made a good point as well, because they could have been a bit more mysterious with the opening, like where it maybe kind of phrasing it so that you didn't like, they could still have the Ewan McGregor at the start, but so that you didn't know whether maybe she was dead or she had left him, or because then that would keep you guessing throughout the film, like does she go away with the Duke?
Yeah, very good point actually, very good point. Like they could have really played up the fact that you don't know who she's going to pick, you don't know what's going to happen, you know that Ewan McGregor's in a bad way to begin with, but like you say, it could have been a much more interesting question mark than it just being like spelled out.
Yeah, it's funny as well that you say it was really over the top, because I really like Moulin Rouge. I'm a fan of Baz Luhrmann as well, so I I think maybe when I'd seen kind of Moulin Rouge before, like on the telly and stuff like that, not properly all the way through. So by the time I did watch it properly, I'd seen other Baz Luhrmann films, so I kind of knew what to expect from it, and knew that it was going to be really weird and over the top.
I'd seen like a few of us. I've seen Romeo and Juliet, and I've seen The Great Gatsby, and I'm actually like I'm a big fan of both. Really liked Romeo and Juliet. I think I actually had the same sort of reaction with Romeo and Juliet, to be fair, where the opening I was like, oh, this is a bit much, and then it sort of calms down a little bit. And
it definitely does take a wee bit to get. It's not one of the movies you can just slip into. You need to like kind of be in the mood to watch it.
I very much agree. But yeah, I'm a big fan of The Great Gatsby. And I guess that is like, it does feel like with that one in particular, he has like toned it down a little bit. It still does have his style, but it's not just. I think that's the thing. Like I like his style. I like it just when it's a little bit more like scaled back.
I think Moulin Rouge is the most like overtly Baz Luhrmann, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he really was making an impression with that one.
Yeah. But no, interesting choice. I really like Moulin Rouge, actually. Now I'm in the mood to watch it. So, like I was saying, that I thought this one was really difficult. But my choice for this one, and it's one that kind of like annoyed me at the time while I was watching it, and annoys me every time I watch it, and it's the movie Castaway with Tom Hanks.
Okay.
Have you seen it?
I also watched that this year. That's another one that I like recently watched, so good pick.
I think the movie's amazing. Obviously Tom Hanks is amazing in it, and it's just basically him in a volleyball for the majority of the movie. So I think everything from when he gets to the island is great, and slightly before that, but the very first scene, which is where it lasts for ages. I think that's my issue with it. It's like a good I'd say maybe up to 5 minutes long, which is a long time when you're not enjoying something. And it's the whole bit where you see the FedEx parcel going from this ranch in America and it going to Russia, and then dotting through all these places and all these people you're never introduced to again, with the exception of the very first woman. You're never introduced to again, you don't care about, they're not relevant to the story at all. It just felt like a really, really long-winded, boring way to introduce Tom Hanks' character.
Yeah, it is a bit like.
Did you agree?
It is. It's weird when you mentioned it. I was like actually struggling, even though I only watched it like a few months ago. I was actually struggling to think of exactly how it did open, which I guess is like worth commenting on. But yeah, like it is. I do remember thinking it is like a weird like FedEx commercial to begin with.
Yes, 100%. It was very I think product placement's always really jarring, and the fact that they were focusing on it so much made it even worse.
Yeah, it is really weirdly like overt and in your face, and really FedExy. I would actually say though, I slightly disagree. I mean, it's a subjective thing. It's your personal pick, so I can't really disagree. I can't tell you that you're wrong.
I'm just actually going to shut this recording just now because I don't agree.
Shutting this podcast down.
Yeah.
I think. Only reason that I would disagree is just because like I do remember it starting, and I remember thinking, okay, this is a weird place for the movie to begin. And I actually remember thinking, I was like, I feel like the movie's not going to be able to, because I think the first shot is like the sort of like deserty country, and I think I was just kind of like, this is. I thought the movie would have started with a more like maybe symbolic image, or more like appropriate for like I obviously knew that he was going to end up on the island, and I kind of thought the movie would maybe have like exactly. I thought the movie would have kind of done more to sort of signal that to begin with, I guess. But the thing that I thought really redeemed it is that the movie does actually pay off the opening, at least the very, very opening at the end, and I think that was a genuine surprise when I was watching it, where I was like, okay, that was actually quite clever that they set this up, and now you're getting it as a payoff, and I think it just sort of makes the ending work, because I think if you change the opening, then I don't think the ending would be as satisfying, but I think there is a sort of nice moment of obviously like it's like a sort of new beginning, a new chapter in his life, but you're like, okay, cool, so this is paying off something that was seen at the start, so it just sort of feels right, it feels appropriate, it feels quite neat, but it's also, when I was watching it, I had no idea that that's what the movie was going to do with it. Again, Castaway is one of those ones again where I think I'd seen like bits of it on TV when I was younger,
Yeah.
So I felt like I kind of knew where the movie was going, but I didn't know anything about that. So that was like a really nice surprise. So yeah, I think for me personally, like the opening actually worked really well, but I do very much get where you're coming from.
Yeah.
That it is a very strange like way to introduce his character.
Yeah. No, I do. I definitely appreciate that it does kind of like bookend the movie, and I wonder if maybe because I watched it when I was quite young, because my mum's a big Tom Hanks fan. So I think I've maybe watched it when I was young and I've not quite got it. I haven't quite like connected it. I remember being confused when he'd painted like the wings and stuff on his little raft thing. So I must have been pretty young to not pick up on that. So I wonder if that's maybe like subconsciously I'm like I'm just angry because I didn't understand it.
I think that's it. When you're younger as well, like you are like much more easily bored. Like I definitely like appreciated it more as like a sort of film student than if I'd watched it when I was younger, I could definitely see myself just being like, okay, when is this movie going to begin? Like,
because definitely like I haven't watched it recently, but in my head I'm like, oh, the best bit's when he's on the island.
Yeah. No, and it very much. Actually, I think I quite like the lead up into. I think like once you get past the opening, I do think like it does a good job of sort of setting up him and his relationship.
Yeah.
And giving you like quite a lot of like setup that is going to be useful over the next like hour or so of the movie when he is on the island. But yeah,
it's definitely like important so that you don't get bored when he's on the island.
Yeah, exactly.
Because the whole movie's a very long movie.
Yeah, it is a very long movie. He's on that island for some time, isn't he?
Yeah, and you feel it.
Yeah, even with the time jump.
But yeah, no. So next up, this was probably my favourite category because I think there's so much that can be done with this next one, and we are of course talking about horror movie openings.
Yeah.
And I think it's a horror movie more than most genres. With the exception of maybe action, but that's such like if people don't enjoy the opening to your horror movie, they're just going to turn it off, because especially like a lot of people will maybe watch them with friends and stuff, and if you're just not feeling the first 5-10 minutes, you're just going to turn it off and watch something else. I think it's the perfect time to give like the audience like a feel for what the movie's going to be, how scary it's going to be, what kind of movie it's going to be. So yeah, what did you go for?
This again, like, is a really interesting one. Like you say, like horror movie openings are very much a thing, and they are like, as you have sort of pointed out, a lot of time they can sort of be like a sampler or a teaser. Like Indiana Jones has this opening, and it's very much like a sort of bite-sized version of the movie. Horror movies usually do the same thing, don't they? Where like they introduce like the sort of concept or the scare, or they like to try and grab you and terrify you right from the beginning, so that you know that they sort of mean business. I think there's almost like two different ways you can go with this. I think like one of my favourite sort of like modern horror movie openings is maybe It Follows, the sort of 2015 film, 2014. Because again, I think that very much like, I think it opens on like one sort of like long like tracking shot, and it's again, you're immediately thrown into like danger. You're sort of like, you're not even like, I like the fact that it doesn't even like bother with like actually giving you like that false sort of setup character introduction thing.
Yeah.
It's literally just straight into this as a woman, and she is like terrified and she's running for her life basically, and then you're basically like in fear. And I think it does a really, really good job of not like spoiling any of the scares to come, but really sort of like setting a sort of tone of like dread and fear. And I think it does like do a really good job. There's so horror, there's like so many with horror, so again this does become like a difficult one to talk about, but I think like to go the other way with it, I can't not mention The Shining, but that's because it does the opposite. Like again, horror movies so often have like their little bite-sized, like here is like the scare condensed, but The Shining goes the complete opposite way, and it starts with a really long car journey. And it is just like it's mental that that's like The Shining is like one of the most iconic horror movies of all time. It's one of the best horror movies of all time for so many reasons. But I think one thing that the movie and Kubrick does so well is just like really sort of builds suspense and builds dread, and that's obviously all about what like the journey is. It sets up the isolation, it sets up how sort of remote everything is, and it really sort of like takes its time establishing like the sort of tone of the film. It's just like some stunning cinematography. Then obviously the score does so much.
Yeah.
The score is doing like all the heavy lifting in that opening, but it does.
Yeah, because
I think
you could put different music on that, and it could be like a car advert.
Yep, exactly. There's definitely film schools out there where they use that as like an example of like the dramatic difference that music can make on a scene. Because it is like all score doing the work on that, and it does like obviously knowing The Shining is, you know that the movie is going to pay off everything that it's sort of setting up in terms of like the terror and the tension. But yeah, since the movie is also about like sort of like the slowly winding tension, I think it does such a good job of just like really sort of like getting into that to begin with, and not doing what other horror movies do where they try and like scare you to begin with so that you know that like they're serious. I love that it just like goes the complete opposite direction. But again, there's like so I feel like you could talk about almost every single horror for this one, because I think you really struggle to find a bad horror opening, really. So I'm curious to hear your picks.
Yeah, I've just quickly, I've got a really funny story about The Shining opening.
Okay.
We were watching it in uni once, and there was a big group of us, and most of us hadn't seen it before. And like you were saying, how the opening scene really like builds the tension and that. So we were watching it, and the car was driving through the hills and whatnot. And everyone was feeling quite tense. It was that nice kind of feeling when you're watching horror movies with your pals.
Yeah.
So that's what we were doing, and then one of my besties, when it flashes up and says like Tuesday or something, whatever it is, it just cuts to black and it just says Tuesday. Fiona started screaming. It was so funny. Like, she got the fright of her life.
That is incredible. First scare of the movie, and it's telling you the day of the week.
I know. I slag her off for it all
Tuesday
the time,
you've ever seen.
even to this day, and that was what, like 2012, so almost 10 years ago. So yeah,
that is
good
absolutely
choice.
terrific. Thank you.
So again, I've gone for what I kind of thought was the obvious choice for this one, and chose the movie Scream. And its opening. I thought it was funny as well because they've kind of, obviously Psycho is really famous. It's a really famous horror movie, and it was really famous for kind of killing off like the big name quite early on in the movie. And Scream just takes that to like a further extent and does it within 5 minutes. Which I think is really clever, because I think the people watching who are familiar with Psycho wouldn't necessarily be the people who are watching Scream. So it was like a kind of nice way to kind of pay homage to like another like classic horror. And obviously Wes Craven himself has a few classic horrors. But no, I think Drew Barrymore as well was like a perfect choice. I read somewhere that she was in the running for Sydney, but I think it was Drew Barrymore herself who had said no, that she would just be like the woman Casey at the start.
Wow.
I think especially in the 90s, Drew Barrymore, early noughties, Drew Barrymore was like a big thing. Everyone kind of knew who she was, so if you're watching it, it kind of, you're like lured into this false sense of security, like, oh, they're not going to kill off Drew Barrymore. And then they do, and then you know they're serious. I think as well that's when you get first obviously introduced to Ghostface, who's a pretty iconic horror movie villain, and the whole concept of that he kind of like taunts people through the phone, and then you've got that amazing line, "What's your favourite scary movie?" Of course, it's classic, and they use that kind of like throughout all of the Scream movies. And I think as well they don't shy away from, like, she's murdered like pretty brutally. She's like stabbed and then she's like hung from a tree and stuff like that. So the movie's not shying away from, it's like, this is what this movie's going to be. Live with it kind of thing. And then it's funny because she's just the kind of starting point. Well, it turns out later that it was Sydney's mum that was the starting point, but from our point of view, she's the starting point of like all the murders, and then it just switches to Sydney and then her kind of story and that. So I think obviously Scream is very meta, like it knows exactly what it's doing, it's quite satirical and stuff. But no, I think that was a really good fun, is that a weird thing to say? way to start that movie, because they are a wee bit like kind of campy and fun as well. But no, that was one that immediately sprung to mind. And the other one just quickly was Halloween, like that shot,
Yep.
of course,
Absolutely. John Carpenter.
which is like the full kind of like long shots through the house, and then you get that amazing reveal at the end when Michael's actually just a little boy.
Yeah.
That would have been, I imagine, if you hadn't seen that. That's one of those ones, obviously, because it came out in like what, the 80s. We didn't obviously see it at the time, so it was kind of like most likely spoiled for us. So I think watching it at the time would have been, you would have been properly shocked as well, that it was
Yeah.
like a little boy that was murdering people.
Yeah, I absolutely love your picks. Yeah, I couldn't agree more, to be honest. I think, like, yeah, for again gone like two different directions, which I really appreciate. But yeah, like Scream again does a really good job of just like telling you what the movie is, and it like is the movie itself is meta, but it manages to like also be quite meta in the fact that, as you said, with like casting Drew Barrymore as like the sort of disposable opening character, and yeah, sort of lulling like the audience into like a false sense of security, and showing you that the movie is going to like sort of upend tropes. It is sort of very aware of what it is, but it's at the same time like it's a masterclass and like commenting on its genre while also just like excelling in its genre. Really, like it does the sort of scares and tension really well, but also it is sort of picking apart horror movies at the same time, and talking about horror movies, and it's quite refreshing to watch a horror that actually like references horror films. They actually exist, because like that's obviously like a thing in horror films. No one ever talks about the fact that horror movies exist. They have no
like
awareness
if something like that was happening to me, I would be like turning to everyone I saw and was like, what is happening? Are we in a movie?
Literally, like, yeah, you would be so aware of the fact that it would feel like you're in a horror movie, and yeah, Scream is so good for just like, it's crazy that it was the first one to really, or at least the biggest one to be like, okay, let's actually like point this out, let's have fun with it and talk about it, and it does it.
It does it so
manages
well.
to, yeah, it does exactly. It does it without like shattering any of like what the movie's going for, or any of the tension, any of like the intrigue. Yeah, and again, like as you sort of mentioned, like having like an iconic villain like, or sort of like, yeah, as Ghostface, the movie does sort of like deliver on its payoff. Like it builds up. It does a really good job of like building the villain, but also paying it off. It's not one of those like disappointing reveals. And then obviously, you mentioned Halloween, which is again a completely different direction, but as you say, like it is a pretty perfect horror movie opening. It sets up the antagonist of the film really, really well, and in a really interesting way as well. Like it's such a clever idea to literally like to put you in his head, basically, to make you like see out of his eyes as he like sort of conducts a murder, and as you say, I guess it's not something I'd ever really thought about before, but I do think like that is one of those movie moments that would have been incredible to see, like just as you say, like raw, going into the cinema and not really knowing what Halloween was going to be, not really knowing what it was going to be about, not really knowing like Michael Myers, because obviously by the time I saw Halloween when I was like 14, I knew about Michael Myers. Like, I knew about like the I think I already knew that it was like a William Shatner mask that he was wearing. So I even knew like trivia about the movie before I'd seen it. Because it's just like so iconic, and again it's like inescapable. Like, you just like the impact of Halloween is sort of felt like to this day. I mean, well, the series
they're
is
still making
ongoing.
Halloween movies, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. They keep rebooting it, kind of. But yeah, no, it's a fantastic like way to sort of introduce the villain, to sort of introduce the tone, to introduce the genre, and to sort of like show you that the stakes are real, to show you that obviously this person is a killer. I can't think of like a more effective way of like of setting up sort of like an antagonist, and similar to sort of Ghostface, like the movie very much delivers on. It's not just like you get like that one creepy opening scene and then Michael Myers is like a bit wet for the rest of the film. Like he is like, he's terrifying through and through, and he is like a proper like presence on the film. I mean, that's what the movie's all about, really, is the sort of like tension of his presence just like in the background, knowing that he could like sort of strike at any point, and knowing that he will deliver on like the sort of threat of the fear that you're feeling. So yeah, both like outstanding picks.
Thank you. I think like you said, we could have done the whole podcast on horror movie openings.
Literally, yeah.
But,
like there was.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, there was so many that came to mind. Another one that I kind of like just quickly wanted to shout out was The Conjuring, because I remember going to see that in the cinemas with a bunch of friends. I remember one of them literally saying to me, they were like, "It's fine," because she was like quite bad with horrors, but she was like, "It's fine. Like the movie's gonna like ease us in. It's not gonna be too scary from the start." And then I remember like her like I remember her like grabbing me at the start and just being like, "Oh my god, okay, this isn't good." And I think like they literally like they had a spin-off basically like franchise that started from like the movie's opening, which is a sort of feat unto itself with obviously like the Annabelle films. I think it's like pretty damn impressive that the movie manages to be like scary at the gate, but also it's kind of funny how like that kind of goes the other way as well, in that it gives you a taste of like the horror, and it sort of sets up like obviously the main like some of the main characters, but it doesn't actually obviously the sort of like Annabelle isn't really a part of like the main movie, and it's quite funny that the movie just like that's like how it opens. It sort of like introduces this like creepy doll and then has almost like nothing to do with the rest of the film. It just kind of like drops it and sort of moves on. So yeah, I felt like The Conjuring is worth shouting out.
Good shout. Our next topic is movies that kind of maybe start at the end or like halfway through, like with Moulin Rouge you were talking about, like a movie that maybe starts with like, oh, this is the story of how I died kind of thing. This one I was a bit more kind of vague about, so I'm interested to see what you kind of come up with.
I mean, there's a right answer to this one. Like I think there is like an objective best pick for this one, which I'm going to talk about first because I can't not. I think like the right answer to this one is Memento. I don't think anything does a better job of Memento, because again that is like the whole point of the movie really, is that it's you're watching like events play it backwards, so really like it couldn't not start at the end, but it still manages to deliver on like such a satisfying way. Have you seen Memento? Yeah, okay, fantastic. Yeah, I just didn't want to risk spoiling anything, but yeah, like obviously the fact that the movie manages to like the movie uses its opening so cleverly and like builds on it really, really well, and the fact that like it, I guess counter to Moulin Rouge, does manage to like shows you like a character basically being killed. It effectively like you think that the movie is giving you like a lot of answers, or a lot more answers than you really should be getting at that point. But the fact the movie then like delivers a twist on that by like the end is like so clever, and it really, really uses like the sort of foreknowledge you have against you. Like I think it's an absolute like genius like bit of storytelling, and again like with the whole movie basically playing backwards, it's like such a clever way of just like introducing that concept from the off, you know. It's very Chris Nolan as well. Chris Nolan does love his his little like he likes to sort of muck about with like continuity and timelines and yeah, exactly. And I think he nowhere does he do it better than in Memento. It's also just like stylistically, like I watched the opening of the movie quite recently, and stylistically it's also just like really, really nice to watch. Like obviously it's like sort of slow-mo reversing, and it just looks like really, really beautiful, and it's sort of like haunting and bleak way, but again it really sets up the fact that like there's going to be violence, there's going to be like danger, like it really, really sets everything up really, really effectively and sort of delivers. So that would be as I said, I feel like
that's the correct choice.
That's the correct choice. But for like my actual personal pick, a one movie that I wanted to shout out that I've only seen the one time, so can't even like remember it like crazy well, but I do remember being like really sort of surprised by, is Monsters, the 2010 I think Gareth Edwards film. Have you ever seen that?
No, I don't think so.
No, so Gareth Edwards
or Monsters.
Monsters. So Gareth Edwards, he went on to basically direct. I don't know if he wrote it. He wrote and directed Monsters. I think he also did like the editing. I think he did like a lot of the effects. Like Monsters had a crew of like something like 6 people. It was like crazy low budget. But he went on to like direct the Godzilla movie, 2014 one with like Bryan Cranston and Aaron Taylor Johnson, and then he went on to direct. I think he went to direct Rogue One as well, Star Wars movie. And I think what he does a really good job of in his films. What you kind of notice, even like from like trailers and stuff of his works, is he does scale really well. Like, you know, obviously you really get a sense of like how big Godzilla is in the Godzilla movie, and in like Rogue One, I remember there being like some sequences where you're like, wow, that like robot or like spaceship looks huge. I think it does a really good job of actually making you feel like the size of things. And Monsters obviously sort of sets that up because again, it's basically like it is like as I sort of mentioned, like a really like small scale, low budget film. I've always like sort of heard bits of trivia and stuff about how a lot of the stuff that they were filming, like a lot of the extras, they weren't actors, they were just people that were like kicking about, because the movies I think they're like in Mexico. Basically it's like this guy and he's like escorting like his boss's daughter out of like across the border, basically out of Mexico. Mexico's become like a quarantine zone because there's like these like alien monsters that have like appeared. So with that, obviously you get like a really good, that's his sort of setup of him doing like his, you know, great big towering monsters and really making you feel the scale of it. But because obviously the movie had like no budget, or like a ridiculously small budget, it just kind of really cleverly used, like they were in Mexico like filming, and they just like, I think they like went to like army compounds. A lot of the stuff that they were filming, they didn't have any permission to film. Literally they just like put a camera where they could, filmed what they could, added like signs and stuff like that, I think in like post, to make it really look like it was like to make it look like Mexico had been like quarantined, but they literally just used things that were there. They didn't like build anything because they didn't have like the means to. Again, they used like the extras were just people that were kicking about that they just asked if they would like get in the film. I think they improvised like a lot of the dialogue. But yeah, the actual opening of the movie, you don't realize, or I didn't realize when I watched it, because I watched it when it first came out. You don't realize that it's like at the end, and I'm sorry to spoil it for you.
Sorry.
But I'm from what I remember, that pretty much reveals that like the two main characters like kind of die. But the movie then doesn't show you that at the end. The movie ends on like, from what I remember, quite a sort of uplifting and positive note, and it's only if you like rewatch it. Because I think I remember watching it and then actually immediately putting the beginning on again, because I think I remember just thinking, hang on, how did that movie start again? And actually being really surprised, but I was like, okay, that's really weird that like the movie not only shows you like the fate of like its main characters, but it also like kind of contrasts with like the note like the movie sort of ends on. And I was like, I thought that was like, I just remember being really impressed by like the cleverness of that, with the fact that like the movie gives you this information, but it really isn't in your face with it, and it kind of like leaves it there for you to pick up on a second time, or if you just have like a really good memory and these things sort of stick in, rather than like being really overt and in your face and trying to be clever. It just kind of like has that payoff in there without ever like spelling out the fact that it's there. So I wanted to shout out Monsters.
Yeah, that's such a good pick, because most of the time when movies kind of start in the middle or the end, it always you then see it in context. So not showing it's actually really like a really cool idea. I might need to check it out.
Yeah, it's definitely worth a watch, even just for like as a sort of feat of filmmaking. As again, like it was made with like very, very creative means.
That's funny. No, my choice is a slightly bigger budget, and that's the movie Goodfellas.
Okay, nice, very good
because
pick.
This is the one that always kind of springs to mind when you think of movies like this. And it was basically, obviously, like, you've seen Goodfellas, haven't you?
Yeah, I have indeed.
Yeah. So the opening is there's three guys in the car, and they kind of hear this noise, and they're like, what was that? Did you hit something? Maybe it's a tire. And then they pull over, open the boot, and there's this guy in there, and he's all bloodied and beaten. And there's one of the characters, Joe Pesci's character, says something like, oh, he's still alive. And I just thought that was always really funny. Like, why were you even concerned? Like, why were you even confused? Like, what was that noise when you know that there's a person in the boot? But it's such a nice way to show them and how like kind of blasé they are about killing someone, because Joe Pesci just straight away, he starts stabbing him with the knife, and then Robert De Niro just starts shooting him with the gun. So they don't they're not fussed about killing this guy. They're not fussed about killing him in any kind of horrible way. So it immediately makes you wonder, like, what else have they done if they can do that, and they're so kind of desensitized to it.
Yep.
So I think it's a good way to, like, instantly get you interested in the characters, like, because it's such odd behavior, because no one else would do that. So I think that's really interesting. Obviously it's got that great line as well, where he says, "As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster." I think that's such a cool way for that movie to open.
Yep.
Yeah, another one I wanted to talk about quickly was the movie The Hangover. Again, very different.
Yep. Yeah.
Because the way that it starts, obviously Bradley Cooper's in the foreground and he's the only one in focus, and there's kind of like 3 or 4 people dotted behind him, but they're facing away or they've got their head in their hands, and they're out of focus, so you can't quite see who they are or what kind of state that they're in, which I think is really funny when you watch the movie, because it doesn't spoil anything. All it spoils is, oh, Doug's missing and we can't find him, which is obviously the whole premise of the movie. But as you go through, there's obviously little like twists, and people appear that aren't the people that you think they're going to be. So I think having that opening, and you can see how it ends, like, oh god, what is happening here? But they've done it in such a way that you don't actually know what's happening, so it doesn't really spoil it. And then obviously he's on the phone to the bride, whose wedding is in 5 hours, she says, so that gives you an immediate kind of like tension, like, oh god, they're gonna have to get this done by 5 o'clock that day so they can get to the wedding on time. So I just thought it was like a really quick, really clever, kind of funny way to start the movie. Like, it's very, like we were talking about before, like, this is how this movie's gonna go. And this is what you're in for, basically.
Absolutely. I love your picks. Again, I love that you went in like 2 very different directions. And yeah, I think like Goodfellas. I'm not, to be honest, I'm not like crazy about Goodfellas. I watched it like about 10 years ago and then actually rewatched it again this year, hoping to kind of enjoy it more. And it's like I like it fine. Like I don't like have any like hatred for the movie. You know, I put it on and I'm like, yeah, it's like fine, but I just don't like love it. I feel like it's just for me, it just doesn't like quite click with me. But that being said, the opening of the movie is fantastic, and like the line you say, what is it? Far back as I knew I always wanted to be a gangster, is just like such a perfect way, such like a Martin Scorsese way to open a movie as well.
Yep.
Just like it completely sums up the character and sort of the point, and as you say, like I like the fact that you mentioned it's like a really good like character hook, because you're like, who are these guys, how did they kind of get there, and it's sort of like, it is I think it is really important. A lot of movies kind of have this like start at the end sort of thing, and it can feel like cheap sometimes, or it can feel like unnecessary, but I think with that one, because you then get so much like expositional like background information on like the main character, I think it does do a really good job of like sort of ensuring that there is a payoff to like the sort of dump that you're about to get, and showing you that like, okay, like this is the trajectory of like this character and like the people he meets and the places he's going to end up. And yeah, I think also, as you sort of say, like when the movie actually gets to that part, it very much delivers on what it sets up. It's not like, you know, it is like a really important scene, and the movie has like more sort of going on with it than like just, it's not just about like, oh, there's a guy in the trunk and they kill him. That doesn't actually like ruin anything like further down the line. I think The Hangover as well.
Yeah, because even thinking back, I can't even remember who the guy is.
Yeah, I think he's quite minor. I think like the impact of the kill is obviously like huge. Like it has like ramifications throughout the sort of like story. So it is like, it makes sense in a lot of ways for like the movie to start there. But yeah, the actual character is like, yeah, he's a very, very minor one. So it's not like, as you say, it's not like he's like in loads of scenes and the movie's like, oh, like, you know, he's gonna die.
Yeah.
It just kind of all happens quite fast and quite surprising. So I think Goodfellas is a fantastic pick. And obviously the Hangover as well, in a very different way. Like I'd almost forgot that it does that. Actually, it does at the start. It does that whole like teaser. Where like they've lost Doug, and they're sort of upfront about it, and as you say, like does a good job of like establishing a ticking clock. I like, as you said, it doesn't spoil any of the sort of like nice reveals that you get when like, obviously they wake up and was it one of the characters is like missing a tooth, and
Yeah.
yeah, like not being able to see them in the background and stuff like that is a really clever like move, but it doesn't. It's really, again, it's quite subtle with it because you don't really pick up on the fact that the movie's hiding them from you.
Yeah.
So it's, yeah, it does a good job of showing you that like the state that the characters end up in without actually spoiling any of like the sort of fun along the way. And the movie is like full of surprises. Again,
Yeah.
there's a reason that the Hangover is like so iconic as well. And yeah, I do think that like, as you say, it's sort of like it also does a really good job of like, again, unlike Moulin Rouge, of like showing you like when a movie gets to that part of the film, there is like then it does then deliver like a sort of twist and a payoff to it. It's not just like, okay, that is exactly what like has happened and is going to happen, and like, yeah, the fact that obviously like you then get the reveal, they then sort of work out where he is after that, and it's quite a clever like reveal, is then all the more satisfying because like you know that moment's sort of like been built up throughout the whole film without the movie. Again, the movie doesn't like, it's not like it keeps reminding you of it and like that, and signaling that it's coming, but the fact that you've seen it, when it then like comes around a second time, it feels satisfying rather than it feeling like, okay, I've seen this already, like,
Yeah.
I didn't need to see this before. So yeah, I think both like absolutely like outstanding picks.
Thank you. I think this next section was again similar to the horror movie section. I feel like we could again have done a whole podcast on this next one, which is our favourite animated opening, which is like animation movies, so whether that's Disney or obviously I was including things like DreamWorks and stuff like that. It doesn't need to be obviously like hand-drawn animation. So yeah, I have a few choices for this one. One of them is of the very obvious one, but I wanted to see if what you've come up with again. By the way.
Yeah, similar to you, like I have a lot of like picks for this one, like so many, because yeah, I guess like you say, so similar to animated movies or similar to horror movies, animated ones you could literally do a podcast on like animated openings, because they are like there's so many of them and they're so good, and they deliver so much. Again, I would say similar to like the last category, there is an objective answer here, so I'm going to mention that one first. I suspect that it's one that you're going to mention, and that is obviously Up. So
Yep.
like, which is just like, everyone loves the opening of Up. It's such a good opening to a movie. You really, really care about the characters. And then obviously there's like a really sort of heartbreaking payoff. I think it's funny, that came out in 2009 as well, say the same year as my favourite pick for Star Trek. So 2009 was obviously a good year for movie openings. Yeah, I don't know why it's strange that just like both of them came out in the same year. But they both sort of deliver the same sort of thing in completely different ways. But yeah, I can't not mention Up. But for my actual like pick, I've got like, again, there's like a couple choices here. All of them are Pixar, I'm not gonna lie. I do have a lot of affinity for Pixar.
Pixar is
like,
notoriously like amazing at opening scenes, so
yeah,
they
exactly.
just excel at them.
Yeah, so good. I really want to mention Wall-E, because like obviously like that movie opens beautifully and is just like they're really showing off their animation skills by that point, and there's no dialogue, which is just like I always like blows me away. I remember, again, I think I was like 13 when I saw it, and I was like, it's insane how like enraptured you are by like the opening of that movie, where not that much happens. It's literally about like a little robot collecting garbage on a planet by himself. He doesn't speak to anyone. He doesn't really do anything, but it manages to be like captivating all the way through. It manages to be like stunning. It manages to really make you like care for the character and sort of feel his isolation, feel his like plight. Really sets up the world. Again, like I just love the pace of it, the fact that it really takes its time. The movie like isn't in a hurry. Again, it really feels like that's Pixar like in their stride. They're just like really confident at that point. They know that they're delivering like on the sort of promise that they're setting up. So yeah, like I definitely have to mention Wall-E, because I love Wall-E to bits anyway. But for possibly my favourite one of theirs would actually be Toy Story 3.
Oh yeah?
Because because you obviously get, like, again, it does feel like they obviously have like a very deliberate like callback to the opening of the first one, where like Andy's playing with the toys, but obviously this time they actually do it from like, I guess, like the perspective of his imagination, and they like.
Is this the one? Sorry, with the toys are on a train, and it's like the Wild West kind of thing.
It is indeed, yeah. It's like a
Yes.
proper action sequence.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're trying to save the orphans.
Of course, yeah, the train full of trolls.
That's it. Always gets me that bit. Yeah, and that's it. Like it's like got spectacle. It's sort of got laughs. It's just like a really nice opening. It's a really like cool callback to like the first one. Again, it really feels like a look how far we've come from like our the first Toy Story, and like
Yeah.
look what we can actually do with our animation now. Again, there's like a lot of confidence to it. It's just sort of it was really cool. I think I was like 15 when Toy Story 3 came out, and obviously as a kid when I saw the first two and I was obsessed with them. It was really cool to like be seeing Toy Story on the big screen again after like so many years, and it does feel like just really nice. It's like a really like nice opening where you just get to kind of see like the toys in their sort of prime and their happiness, and obviously it then has like, you know, it starts off with Andy playing, and then it sort of like rolls through the years as he's getting older, and again like sort of sets up that sort of like bond, that connection, in a really sort of meaningful way, that again the movie like then massively delivers on. So yeah, I think like Toy Story 3 is just like, again, like similar to Indiana Jones as well. It is just like a sort of like mini movie in and of itself.
Yeah.
And it just sort of doesn't take itself too seriously, and yeah, it's so much fun.
It is very fun. It's like such a fun way because the characters are because it's Ham, not like a big kind of like spaceship or something as well. It's like a fun way to get like the characters that we already know, and like and just like because they do it in the first movie as well, where he's like, what's his name? He's like evil Dr. Porkchop or something.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Do you know what's actually really funny though? One of my choices for mine was Toy Story 2.
Fair. I was obsessed with that opening as a kid. Like,
Yeah.
I thought it was the coolest thing ever.
Well, that's kind of what I've written down. I do remember, I think actually the first time I saw it was on the ferry going over to France, which is funny. But I just thought it was like the coolest thing ever, and I thought it was so like, I remember obviously being very young, and I was like almost like confused, like what am I watching? Like, is this the movie? And then it does such a good job, obviously. It's definitely one that always sticks in my mind, and I rewatched it recently, and like I knew it was coming, and I was like excited for it. So, and part of my notes actually was that it's obviously a callback to the first one, and then they go even further in the third one, which is obviously what you're talking about. Because in Toy Story 2 it's a game that you're kind of watching, whereas obviously Toy Story 3 it's Andy actually playing or whatever. But no, I thought that was funny that we'd both come up with Toy Story movies, but not the same one.
Yeah, that is very interesting actually. And again, like I think I have a lot of nostalgia for the second one. Like, the second one as a kid, I was obsessed with it, and in particular the opening. But yeah, it is so cool. And as you mentioned as well, like I even really thought it is a cool like sort of subversion of like what you get in the first one, where it's like the first one's obviously like Andy's imagination, and then the second one is like a video game. And it's a cool way to just like it's just like a cool excuse for them to have like a sort of flashy opening that's completely different from like the rest of the film, but it's just like really cool in its own right.
Yeah, definitely. And I think obviously you can't not talk about Up. And I think what they do so well in that is that there's very little dialogue, like you were saying about Wall-E. But they managed to tell the story of this man's entire life with like no dialogue, which is insane. Which is I think what Pixar does best. It's weird because you couldn't, obviously Disney and Pixar are the same, but Pixar has a very particular Pixar movie feel to it, which I think they're all about like tapping into like the characters' emotions and stuff like that, and I'd say maybe more so than traditional like Disney movies. So yeah, I think that's Up is like the pinnacle of Pixar openings, I would say.
Absolutely. It's a really good point actually about the lack of dialogue. It is very minimalistic, and I guess sort of similar to talking about The Shining. The score does a lot of the heavy lifting. Obviously, the animation itself
similar
is
to The Shining.
There, but yeah, true. Not something I thought I would say today. But you get what I'm saying. The score does a lot of like it really like the score basically is like a character unto itself, and I mean kind of the case with like a lot of movies, but like with that movie, I think it does such a good job of like you connect that music to like the character, and the relationship between like Carl and Ellie, and again, like it is effectively the whole premise is based on like that man and his relationship, and it does such a good job of just like putting you in his shoes and actually really making you feel for the guy, and you sort of like fall in love with both characters, and you really do feel the pain of like his loss, and it's like such a beautiful movie opening.
Yeah, definitely. I think the last one that I'll talk about is perhaps the best opening moment of all time, and that's of course The Lion King.
Yeah, fair.
Which is again, it's the obvious choice. It's so iconic. You get that kind of, because it's just black, and then it just opens with that massive big kind of sunrise. And then there's obviously the music, which is again iconic. And then the funny thing about the music, kind of similar to the no dialogue thing, is that you don't. The first few lines aren't in English, so you don't know what they're saying. You're just going with it. You're just like, yeah, this is amazing. I'm feeling it.
True. Yeah, it's a very, very like high energy, very like flashy, in your face opening, and it's like bursting with confidence. But again, like the whole, I mean, the movie very much delivers on it, and it is such a cool way to just like open the film, and like everyone loves to open to The Lion King.
Yeah, I think as well. I feel like they were like almost like showing off, like in the first 5 minutes of the movie, like, oh, look how much we can do, that we've animated every animal in Africa.
Yeah, exactly. Can I ask, because you've seen the Disney like reboot of The Lion King, did they copy the opening in the new one?
Yeah,
does it
it's
open
like
the exact same way?
Shot for shot, yeah.
Of course. But to be fair, I guess you can't deviate from that, because like there's no, like, once you have like that opening for The Lion King, which I guess just spells out why they should never have remade it. You can't then, there's no ending that would be, there's no opening rather that would be like in any way as satisfying as that, and you would that is the one thing that like you're sitting in the cinema, and I guess you're kind of waiting for for that opening to happen. You just want to see it like done again.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like, I didn't enjoy the remake, but that's a story for a different day. But I do feel, in their defence, it would have been impossible. They wouldn't have been able to top it, so anything would have been disappointing. And like you're saying, if they changed it in any way, you would have been like, what was that? Why didn't they have the whole opening of everyone gathering at Pride Rock? So they didn't.
Exactly.
Yeah, it was a lose-lose for them in that scenario. Which, you're right, they shouldn't have remade it in that case.
Yeah. Well, that's I think that's why I never saw it, because I was like, they can't top what they've already done, and
I'm just wasting everyone's time by watching it.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like I would have been more excited if they'd done it the other way. Not that that's like possible, but if it was like previously a CG movie and they were like, okay, now we're going to do like hand-drawn animation for a remake, I think I would have been a lot more interested in like doing it that way. But yeah, I didn't really think that like using actual animation would bring anything new to The Lion King, and I think like the cartoon does such a good job of like, it's so like visually striking. I think that's the thing. The whole
movie as well is like gorgeous.
Yeah, it is. It really is like probably the best example of like a hand-drawn animated movie, just like how good that can look and how much the colours sort of pop, and again that like opening like sort of sunrise is just like, it's stunning. And I think more stunning than it would have been were it like actual cinematography, which I think is why it works so well, because like it's so like comfortable in its like category and its genre and like being animation, and it does so much with like the fact that it's an animation, that I think it's just like, it loves the fact that it's a cartoon, and you love the fact that it's a cartoon.
Yeah, but no, I think that's a perfect place to stop on the peak movie opening. We'll stop there.
I agree. I completely agree.
But no, thank you very much, Sam. I liked your choices. Were very interesting.
Thank you. Well, I very much liked yours. I think you really brought it, and it's a really interesting like topic for the podcast. So thank you.
Yeah, well, no worries, because I stole the idea from you when you did endings. So, so you can get some of the credit. I wasn't trying to pat myself on
the back. Fair.
But no, thank you as always. And I think what I'll try and do is, if I can find them on YouTube, just kind of put like our top picks in the description, just so that people can have a look at them if they want, if you haven't seen them or whatever. And yeah, I think that's us until 2 weeks from now, where Sam, it's your turn again. Lucky 13.
Yes, indeed. Oh dear.
But yeah, well, thanks again, and see you soon.
farewell.
See ya.